and she'll be giving us her thoughts on basic training when people are recruited into the Air Force, and also what it takes to succeed in the Royal Air Force and life in general. Suraya, welcome.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here today and joining you all.
Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit today about your career to date, and then also about what's happening at Cranwell, what your role is at Cranwell, and kind of what's happening at the moment and what the future of activities at Cranwell are. Could we start though? Your background's aircrew, isn't it? Is that correct?
Yes, so that's right. I joined as a navigator back in the early 90s, I guess. Well, mid-90s, well, early 90s, yeah. So yes,
you don't
I flew the Tornado F3. So I did 3 tours on that, which I, absolutely loved before sort of getting promoted, and then moving into kind of flying training when I had children, basically. So back at Cranwell. So I've actually done sort of a couple of flying tours at Cranwell as instructors and sort of bosses of the squadron there of, when we used to train all of our rear crew. So that's all the non-commissioned air crew, as well as the sort of navigators of old, or weapons systems officers as we call them these days. So that's my sort of background. That's how I started.
Air Warfare Centre, did I?
Yeah, so, well, I did so as a staff tour, I was OC 92 Squadron, which is sort of in charge of Air Force tactics, operational tactics and training in the Royal Air Force. So, and that was based at Waddington, yes, in the Air Warfare Centre. But I did that as a wing commander before going back to Cranwell again as officer commanding 55 Squadron, which was all of the rear crew training, sort of in 2010, and the SDSR then. So after that, sort of I moved away from the sort of combat air sort of flying environment, and I've been working in the sort of intelligence and ISTAR, so intelligence, surveillance and target acquisition. So all of our kind of surveillance aircraft based at Waddington. I've done a couple of tours down in London in the Ministry of Defence at the sort of joint sort of strategic level in the Operations Directorate, and latterly as the military assistant to the Vice Chief of Defence Staff. Which is a really, really interesting job. And I've done a couple of, I've done advanced command staff course and the higher command staff course, which was, very enjoyable, and learnt a lot there. And then took over at Cranwell at the end of last year.
So can we just take you a little bit back then to when you were Deputy Commander of ISTAR, the ISTAR Force?
Yes.
What actually did that role involve on a day-to-day basis?
Wow. So I worked in the Force headquarters at Royal Air Force Waddington, and so my job was in essence the Force generation of ISTAR assets. That's the aircraft, but also the analysts and everything that sort of came with it. So really, really busy job. Clearly the ISTAR Force in huge demand on operations kind of around the world continuously. So a constant sort of struggle with demands that really outstripped what we had, and constantly kind of putting a lot of the crews and aircraft under a huge amount of pressure. But it was a really, really enjoyable job, and I learnt a huge amount doing it.
And I'm acutely conscious that we've got a real range of people on this call, and I'm always trying to remind myself not to kind of use TLAs and all of that kind of theological abbreviations and all of that kind of stuff. So could you just talk to people about what is ISTAR? Let's go with what is ISTAR?
Yeah, so that is the name that we've given. It's intelligence, surveillance and target acquisition. So it's all of our surveillance aircraft. So ranging from our unmanned or remotely piloted aircraft, so all of our Reapers, also Rivet Joint, which is big surveillance sort of signals intelligence and communications intelligence sort of platform. We also have the E3, which is actually a command and control sort of airborne early warning aircraft. We've got Shadow as well, which is another kind of surveillance aircraft that we've got, and Sentinel is the final one, and of course P8, which is the maritime patrol aircraft, which replaces the Nimrod. That was just coming to service really, and we were working on getting that capability into service when I was in that role, which is a few years ago now. But then it also incorporates all of, that's the sort of collection side of ISTAR, as it were, the platforms that go up and get all the images, the data and the information. But the really, really important thing about ISTAR is the processing and the analysis of that information, which turns it into the bit that we can use then to sort of inform our decision making in our headquarters. And all of that is done by our linguists, our analysts, so all of the sort of intelligence cadre, which is a huge part of the iStar enterprise, but often we focus on the sort of shiny aircraft and we forget about actually almost the brains behind the outfit, and that's so it incorporates the whole of it.
So it really does encompass a huge cross section of the Air Force in terms of trades, branches, roles.
Indeed, it really does. It really does. I mean, it's growing into a really large force, and obviously that's absolutely right, because of the importance of the role that it has, across all of defence.
So can we take you to your, I think it was just before you arrived at Cranwell, were you were Director of Coalition Air Operations over in the Middle East?
Yeah, so I was the battle director. So I did, so when I finished High Command and Staff course last sort of Easter, I then deployed out to the Middle East, to Qatar and the Air Operations Centre at Al Udeid, sort of summer of last year until towards the end of last year. And my role was the battle director in the Air Operations Centre, which is, it's actually, I'm not sort of out there as a Brit, as it were. I'm working within the American chain of command. Absolutely fascinating job. So in essence, my job as battle director was the execution of the daily air tasking order, which was around about 700 aircraft a day, flying really from Somalia up the Red Sea, sort of over sort of Syria, Turkey, Syria, into the sort of Gulf of the Arabian Gulf, and obviously into Afghanistan as well. So that whole, what the Americans call Central Command, CENTCOM, that whole sort of area of responsibility with, as I say, 600 or 700 aircraft a day, flying their daily missions, whatever they might be. So combat, surveillance, the whole range of, from the carriers as well, the American carriers. So an absolutely fascinating job. When everything was running smoothly, relatively straightforward, despite the number of aircraft. When things started going, wrong, then genuinely challenging, trying to keep all the balls in the air. And it was a really fascinating time, actually. I mean, when I got out there, it was all of the tensions out in the Arabian Gulf with the Iranians. Obviously, they'd shot down one of the American unmanned aircraft. Also, they'd just seized some of our UK flagged ships. So there was a huge amount of tension on the Iranian side. And then partway through my tour out there, the Turkish started their operation into northern Syria against the Kurds, which sort of started the coalition withdrawal from parts of Syria. So a really, genuinely fascinating sort of time, and just the confusion and the complexity of the geopolitical situation out there was a genuine challenge, but great experience, and certainly kept me very busy.
And was that your kind of biggest challenge, that kind of wider geopolitical kind of environment that you're working in, or was it the tight timescales you're working to, the complexities of 500-600 aircraft?
Yeah, I think it was the rate of change. Obviously when we go out on operations, we like to plan, we like to have a plan, we like to do, not that we can't react dynamically to things, but these were such huge changes. We had our plan for Syria, then suddenly we were withdrawing from Syria because of the Turkish operation, and clearly they're a NATO partner. And so, the speed at which the situation just suddenly changed, and having to then, change the whole campaign to sort of react to that was probably the biggest challenge, to try and sort of figure out what was going on and understand, what the political direction was, and what the various different coalitions wanted to do, and sort of make sense of the situation as it very, very rapidly evolved. Yeah.
And looking back, I mean, you've had a really varied, interesting career from your, Tornado Navigator days on, and it's lots and lots of different types of roles. Which of those roles do you think stood you in best stead to be able to nail that job last year? Because we're assuming you nailed it.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. That's a really interesting question, and I think my philosophy in the Air Force is I always like to do different things. So each tour I've done, I've tried to kind of do something new, learn a new skill, broaden my kind of horizons and my experience base a little bit. And so I think, because I chosen and very much, wanted a career like that sort of challenges me rather than doing, being a sort of a deep expert at one thing. I think that really helped me. I mean, there was so much actually that the hardest aspect of the job last year was the strategic, complexity of it. And actually working in Vice Chief's office was all very strategic, dealing with, the Russians, dealing with, really difficult kind of strategic issues and awkward not coalition partners, but awkward international partners, and really watching how he, as the Vice Chief, kind of dealt with those situations. I think, I learnt a huge amount from that experience, which actually, when one of my jobs in the Air Operations Centre last year was to speak on the Russian deconfliction line, to make sure that we didn't end up in an inadvertent conflict with the Russians, because we were flying in close proximity with them, obviously with them supporting the Syrian government and then making an agreement with the Kurds as well. So, again, my experiences from that role genuinely helped me, and actually from my time in the Ops Directorate as well, at the sort of joint strategic level, really helped me deal with that job. But then obviously my experiences in the I-Star Force and in combat air and being a weapons instructor helped me deal with the full range of aircraft that I had to deal with and be in charge of and direct, I suppose. So I can't sort of pin down one specific tool. I think all of my experiences over sort of the last 25 years or 26 years of my career helped me be able to cope with that job. But then also, as the battle director, your job as a leader, I have a team of about 300 people in the Air Operations Centre who are all running different jobs that look to you for leadership and guidance. And so all of the sort of skills that you learn as an officer, just generally, so nothing to do with flying and aviation, but your sort of leadership skills, how to build a team, how to get the best out of a team, all of these things kind of help you do the job, really. So, I think my entire experience in the Air Force sort of helped me be able to deal with it and hope to get through it well.
And I kind of get a sense from you that maybe and we first met, I think, when we were in our early 20s, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
And I think that, and just don't. I get the sense that the kind of feeling of reward that you used to get from flying and doing some really kind of serious complex flying, do you now get that kind of same feeling of reward from leadership, from the strategic kind of, complex strategic stuff?
I suppose so. I think, it comes back to this idea of challenge. I like to be challenged. I like to do new things. And, people often ask me, do you miss flying? And if I could go back and do my 20s all over again, I would, do it in a heartbeat. But actually, I think most aviators fear the idea of moving out of the cockpit and into a staff job. But actually, I found, you find other ways to challenge yourself. And having, flown the F3 for so many years, I remember when I first started flying, you'd be leading a mission, you'd think about it really hard the night before, you'd plan your tactics, you'd be in hours before, kind of getting the brief ready, and and it was you had to genuinely think hard, and it took a lot of sort of, mental capacity to do it, because it was new and you were learning. And, by the time I left the F3, you'd go you'd rock up, half an hour before the brief was due to start, because you'd done it all, so it was sort of second nature to you, and it was still challenging, it was still exciting, but actually, because you've done it for so many years, it becomes slightly easier, of course, like anything you do. And so what I found actually is going into various different staff and command tours and doing different things, and especially seeking out genuinely new, different jobs rather than doing kind of the same job each tour. I feel like I've maintained that sense of challenge, which has really kept me engaged and interested in the job that I've done. And I can honestly say I've loved every single job that I've done kind of in the Air Force, which is why I'm still here. So, 26 years later.
And we were talking to Kirsty Murphy last week, and she definitely had a plan. She had a plan for a lot of, and then some things came in and she had to deviate from the plan, but she definitely had a plan that she kind of stuck to. Did you start with that plan of, I'm going to get a real variety of challenging different roles, not just a kind of traditional route?
I don't think I did, actually. I mean, I think I sort of started off with a plan that, I wanted to join the Air Force. I wanted to fly fast jets. I wanted to be a weapons instructor. I'd really wanted to try and get promoted to squadron leader. I think that was really as far as my aspirations or my plan went. And actually that sort of all happened, relatively quickly. And since then, I genuinely haven't had a plan. And when I was younger, I used to sort of want to know where I was going on my next tour, what I was doing, how it would all kind of work out. And then I realised that was incredibly stressful in the Air Force, because of course you've got your, your tours, your sort of posting cycle, and much as you can have a plan and you can have an aspiration to do X, Y, or Z, it depends on whether that job is available at the time that you're available. It can depend on whether you're promoted at a certain time. There are so many variables that are just outside of your control that actually it generated more stress, I think, trying to have a plan, because it wasn't within your gift to control. So I think, and especially, after I had children, trying to figure out what next and how can I, which school were they, trying to make a plan. I genuinely found it stressful, sort of trying to. So I think I made peace a long time ago that actually having no plan was the best plan, and it was far less stressful just to sort of take each tour as it came and not even think about, what was coming next until you got within a few months of posting, and then try and figure out where to go and what to do. And so that's kind of how I've lived the last sort of, decade at least, I think, of my career, and will continue to do so. So I have absolutely no plan.
And I suppose your advice to any of the cadets who are currently watching and probably will watch this afterwards is you don't have to have a plan, but you just need to do what you're doing at the moment to the absolute best of your ability and totally nail it, because that will stand you in good stead.
Absolutely. I do believe in that. And I think if you're the kind of person that likes to do different things, that likes challenge, that that is absolutely fine. You will find it. There are always so many opportunities out there, and one door closes and another 5 open. So it's always good to have aspirations and goals, absolutely. But in terms of I want to do very specific plan, I think it's quite hard generally in life, because of course you never know what's going to happen and what else is going on around you. But yeah, but absolutely doing your best and seeking that next challenge, I think, is really, really key.
And you're also, I think, a really good exemplar, role model, whatever, to show that it is perfectly possible to have a really high-flying career in the Air Force and have kids. And a husband who's also in the Air Force.
Yeah, no, indeed. I know we've got the triple whammy. Yes, no, it is. I mean, it's not, I think having children and a career is always tough, whether you're in the military or not. I think in the military there are some extra complexities with the posting cycle, the fact that you change jobs every few years, but it's getting easier and easier. The flexible working that the Air Force is coming up with, they absolutely recognise that every family is different, that people have different pressures, different things that they're seeking, different aspirations, and the Air Force is really, really embracing this idea of more flexible working and trying to accommodate the full range of sort of family circumstances and situations that people have nowadays, which is absolutely right. And of course there are so many more options out there in terms of childcare and support that you can get, that I think it's definitely getting easier. But it's always going to be a challenge. I think as a parent you always feel a bit guilty about leaving your children and going off and working hard, and I think that's true of anybody and any career and parenthood.
Yeah. So let's talk about the current role then. So you became Commandant Cranwell when?
Well, so right at the end of last year, so I sort of snuck in about a week before Christmas, and I had the privilege of doing one graduation before the sort of Christmas break, but I suppose properly started in January, which is an absolute privilege to be back there.
A couple of months before the world went weird.
Yes, I did indeed. So it's a fascinating job actually, and although my title is Commandant Cranwell, it's a little bit misleading, because my sort of area of responsibility is so much broader than Cranwell. So I suppose it's sort of divided into three pillars. The first pillar is sort of inspire and attract. So this is sort of aimed, we've got a youth and STEM program aimed at 11 to 14-year-olds, trying to engender real love and enthusiasm for STEM subjects, sort of in conjunction with schools, and that's a national program.
And how do you do that?
Which started with,
how do you do that?
Oh, so we have a wonderful team. I have a wonderful team at Cranwell. This sort of started in the RAF 100 year with the Inspire theme. So they work with schools, they work with things like the Big Bang, you know, at the NEC. They have residential courses. We have a whole host of STEM ambassadors throughout the Air Force who come and support other people. So it's a collaboration with various different industries, with schools, with national, you know, bodies, to sort of provide these camps, these challenges, these resources. You know, we've got STEM in a box so that we can send them off to schools and they can run classes, you know, doing, you know, whether it's programming little Spyro balls or building things or whatever, you know, programming Lego robots. I mean, there's a whole range of things, but it's absolutely not designed to recruit. It is just designed to get the 11 to 14-year-old into STEM subjects in the hope that they will go on to do engineering or apprenticeships or whatever, be that an industry or of course in the Air Force. So hugely successful program. We reach over 1 million children a year, and our aim is to keep that up for the, you know, the next 10 years, to really try and, you know, infuse STEM as in that age group. So start them young. We then have the Air and Defence College, which is sort of, for those who don't want to go and do A-level, they can go and do BTECs, and this is a more vocational Air and Defence College with an option for those who wish to then join as a recruit into the Royal Air Force at RAF Halton. And then I've got the University Air Squadrons.
Sorry, where's the college? Where's the Air and Defence College? So
we've got Lincoln, we've got Stamford, and we're just about to branch out into East Anglia as well. So it's a fairly new initiative. So we're working with existing colleges. So it's a course that is provided, and we support that. And hopefully we'll expand it as well. It's been very successful actually, especially when we're looking at things like cyber. You know, trying to get people who perhaps don't want to go down a traditional route of A-levels and degrees, but want to do something more vocational and apprenticeship based, then it's sort of a good alternative for people who prefer that kind of study.
So something you'd really recommend to people as a foundation then, if they're interested in going into the Air Force and they don't want to do that traditional route?
No, indeed. I think it's a really good, and actually one of my friends' sons did it, and you know, before I even took over this job, she was talking to me about it and how wonderful she thought it had been, and how her son really enjoyed it, and it sort of opened his eyes to the range of things that are out there that you can do within the Air Force, and you know, and it was where his interests lay in the kind of computer sort of realm. So it really was very effective for him. And also within that pillar, I've got the University Air Squadrons as well, and the Air Experience Flying. So all around the country, which is fantastic. I've then got the second pillar, which is to train those who join the Air Force. So that's all of the officers at RAF Cranwell who come and join the Air Force, but also all of the recruits who join the Air Force as well down at Royal Air Force Halton. So that all comes under my sort of area of responsibility. And finally, I've got the third pillar, which is sort of what I call the postgraduate pillar, which comprises the TEDA Academy of Leadership and the Robson Academy of Resilience. So the idea is that we develop leadership and resilience in all of our people. So that's sort of Air Force wide, through the TEDA Academy and a number of courses that they run, and online. We've moved a lot of stuff online, obviously, since the beginning of lockdown. And on the Robson side, we're looking at kind of resilience training, adventurous training, all of our kind of specialist survive to operate training down at St Morgan. And
so that's mental and physical resilience.
Indeed.
Okay.
So it's actually a very broad sort of area of responsibility, which keeps me on the road a fair bit normally. Although obviously since the beginning of lockdown, it has changed really quite drastically.
So how has it changed then? Well, I mean, you may not be able to tell us everything, but how has it changed in terms of how are you still trying to, you know, get people moving through your system when you can't do things face to face?
Well, so we've carried on doing our initial training for both officers and recruits, because we've had to maintain the pipeline of people entering the Air Force, obviously, because otherwise the impacts further downstream would be significant. We've had to reduce the number of people that we're bringing through to sort of critical, branches and trades only, certainly on the recruit side. And we've had to slow down the entry a little bit at Cranwell, just so that we can try and adhere to the government guidelines. So in effect, we've adapted our training to ensure that we social distance, to put in place lots of different kind of hygiene regimes, etc., to reduce the risk to our instructors, support staff, and cadets and students going through. So that was certainly challenging in the first few weeks, trying to adapt everything whilst we were still doing it. And of course, it took people a while to settle down, to sort of understand, what does this mean? What's the risk to me? How can we make it work? So that was a fairly challenging couple of weeks, but we seem to have settled into a sort of a new normal now, and we've kept obviously that pipeline going for both the officers and the recruits. In other parts of the enterprise, obviously all the stuff with schools and universities, that has in effect ceased, in line with the schools and universities themselves. But we have done a huge amount of work. We're moving stuff into the virtual space really, really rapidly. So the university air squadrons are doing sort of virtual ground training and virtual town nights that they would normally do in person. The same with the Youth and STEM programme. We've been working with all of the schools, trying to provide online resources to support families and schools during lockdown, because it's a perfect opportunity to give people projects and to give them activities that they can get engaged with. So that's been great. And the same on the sort of leadership side, particularly in resilience, actually, online webinars, online conferences and forums. And of course, working from home, being more isolated is, genuinely something new for the military, where although, there is a big drive to embrace more flexible working from home, I think, it's been a fairly slow shift in culture. We are used to, generally in the military, coming into work and being in work all day. So actually now people are working remotely, which has been, phenomenally successful, actually. We've maintained output. It's kind of worked. It's just a big change to the way we normally do things. And of course, that brings different challenges. How do you lead a team when they're spread about remotely? The isolation, you don't have the support and the network that you do have normally. So actually for TEDA and the Leadership Academy, they've done a lot of work trying to help people kind of through that, leading through crisis, leading yourself, supporting yourself in isolation, improving your sort of resilience. So we've done quite a lot of work kind of Air Force wide to really try and help people do that. And of course, I think a lot of virtual stuff is here to stay. I think we will migrate an awful lot of our training to the virtual platforms, which again was always an aspiration. I just think it's kind of speeded the process up maybe 2 or 3 years.
So you think that COVID-19 has had, in some ways, and God knows it's an awful situation, but there has been a positive effect for some of the ways that you do business?
I think so, and I think it's really important to try and find those positives as well. It's a horrendous situation nationally, and the lockdown has been really difficult, and obviously many people have lost loved ones, and it's a tragic situation. The Air Force has been striving to sort of modernise the way it works, and we have this sort of Astra program, which is our journey over to the next sort of to 2030 and 2040, and how we try and bring where we want to be there forward to the here and now, and really try and make ourselves a much more modern organisation, so we can compete in society, we can attract a more diverse range of employees, etc. So this was absolutely part of the grand plan, but I do think that the lockdown and this crisis has almost been a catalyst to sort of, we've leapt forward sort of 2 or 3 years, and actually achieved through necessity what we wanted to achieve, and probably would have taken longer had we not had the crisis. So yes, I think there are some really, really important lessons that we need to learn from in terms of the way we work, and we need to be careful that we don't go back to the old ways of working, but we need to take the positives and the benefits that this has provided us and implement that in our day-to-day activities.
Thank you so much to Air Commodore Suraya Marshall for joining us today, and I think that was a fascinating insight into how Suraya and her team, despite the challenges of COVID, are achieving a step change in the initial training that recruits to the Royal Air Force receive. Now, that was about half of the interview with Suraya. So if you want to watch the full version, please go to our Project Entertain page on the RAF Association website, rafa.org.uk, and you can find the link to the full version there. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you'll join us on Project